Hi, this is Eliane Elias. I have a new album coming out in 2021, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Well-known modernist architects came to fame in a time before computers, a time where getting published in magazines was the mid-century equivalent of going viral. Even if an architect lived in a large metro area such as Los Angeles, word of mouth and house tours wouldn't get you the big commissions. Blowing up meant having photos of your work in major publications of the era. To get those photos, you had to have a great photographer who really understood design and light and capturing the beauty of a project. Joining us today are Eric Bricker, producer of Visual Acoustics, a documentary about the life and career of celebrated architecture photographer Julius Shulman, and Keith Isaacs, one of the South's rising stars in architectural photography. Later on, we'll enjoy some jazz with Stacey Kent. And now, no stranger to cameras from his salad days as a greeting card model, here's your host, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom. I did indeed have a short-lived career as a greeting card model. Very short. Just 2 engagements. The first one was for a Father's Day card.
Aww.
They had me in a business suit in a very nice colonial house kitchen on East Franklin Street in Chapel Hill. And my job was to look like a busy, hairy dad headed to work trying to iron my tie while wearing it. I was told this card was a huge success, whatever that means in the greeting card world. 1,000 cards, 10,000 cards. This breakout role led to one more gig as a background greeting card golfer.
Background golfer?
But yeah, my job was to stare curiously at a distance at other golfers. And that's it. To this day, I still don't know what those golfers were doing. After that, as they say in Kansas City, the greeting card capital of the world, I left the industry never to return. And apparently that was just fine with them. Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from Wendy Robineau and Don Beskin, and by Modernist realtor Angela Roll.
In our continuing space saga, welcome to Episode 2. There is unrest in the Galactic Senate, making it difficult for the few remaining modernist knights to maintain design harmony. Several thousand planets have declared it illegal to build modernist, insisting on symmetrical structures, on clear-cut lots with Palladian windows, missile silo entries, and vast arrays of gables and dormers. Senator Angela Roll, former slave girl rescued by Queen Hadid back in Episode 1, has a critical vote to create an army of design schools. But the evil emperor has other plans, and rumor has it the rebel postmodernists, yes, they're still around, are building a new battle cruiser that doubles as a ski slope when it lands. Copycats! Centuries earlier in 2021, you can count on Senator Angela's great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, a real estate agent with specialized design training, advising buyers and sellers of modernist houses on everything from appropriate renovation to ripping out Palladian windows. Angela Roll is your special real estate agent. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL, or call her at 919-995-0550.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Eats, shoots, and leaves. Are we describing koalas or hungry photographers? Today, it's photographers. Although if we can find a way to connect those cute koalas to modernism, by God, we're going to do it. The late, great architectural photographer Julius Shulman captured the work of nearly every 20th century modern and progressive architect since the 1930s, including the big names like Frank Lloyd Wright, Richard Neutra, John Lautner, and Frank Gehry. Shulman's images brought modernist architecture brightly into the American spotlight and put these and other architects on the map. You know, it could be a good movie trailer.
Really? Seriously?
Do it, Tom. Do it!
now. In a mid-century world with thousands of architects and no computers, no internet, no social media, and no email, one man, one camera, one mission will change the built environment. New buildings will rise, and with it, an order of beauty the world has never seen. Coming to theaters this summer, Jason Statham is Richard Neutra. Bruce Willis is Julius Shulman. And Bernie Sanders is the mysterious stranger from Philadelphia. In Visual Acoustics 2, The Wrath of Louis Kahn.
This film was not yet been rated.
Now that I would love to see. We'll pitch that idea today to our first guest, Eric Bricker, who was born in St. Louis and studied theater, moving to L.A. to act. Instead, he became an art consultant and documentary film writer and director, known for the brilliant documentary Visual Acoustics, The Modernism of Julius Shulman. This movie, which is really one of the very best design docs ever made, was narrated by Dustin Hoffman and won a number of awards at film festivals around the world. Eric also wrote and directed Calling on Ishmael in 2014, and he has an upcoming film, Illumination, about the world of those cool Airstream travel trailers. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, George and Tom.
Keith Isaacs grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, and studied advertising and marketing and graphic design in college. But like our musical guest, Stacey Kent, Keith was in Europe when he decided to turn his hobby into a career. While living in Barcelona, he caught the photography bug and started exhibiting and selling photographs. He returned to Raleigh and works as an architecture and interiors photographer with a focus on the built environment and its connection to landscape and how people experience spaces. Keith has been commissioned by architects such as our own Frank Harmon, Louis Cherry, the Raleigh Architecture Company, Tonic Design, and his photos have appeared in Arch Daily, Atomic Ranch, Architectural Digest, Curbed, and Architizer, among others. In 2018, he was on Photo Shelter's list of top photographers. His wife, Sarah Mingote, assists him on photo shoots and does post-production. They both love modernist architecture. Welcome, Keith.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Really good to be here.
So, Eric, before we get started, what do you think of our movie idea for Visual Acoustics 2?
Yeah, that's the first thing that I wanted to throw at you was how did you get Bruce Willis to sign on to play Shulman?
We have blackmail in his agent.
Yeah, we know something about his house, yeah.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, I knew there something had to be up there. Problems of producing, you know.
Eric, how did you come across architecture and Julius Shulman? Because the film is just an extraordinarily detailed account of his life, and you got to have him involved in it all the way through production. So when did this all start for you? It was quite a while ago, wasn't it?
Sure. Well, let me pull that apart, and I'll start with architecture first. And I went to, as you said, I'm from St. Louis. I went to, the St. Louis question is, what high school did you go to?
Oh.
So I went to Parkway West High School, and I was fortunate enough in high school, both with my history classes and I took Latin. Every year we took architectural field trips. And I didn't know it until later, but I think that's really what kind of turned me on to architecture. And then fast forward, let's see, I graduated in 1988. So almost 10 years later, spring of 1999, I actually met Julius by chance. I was working as an art consultant, and I needed some 1930s black and white photographs of San Francisco. And I met Julius's next door neighbor, and we got to talking, and this came up that what I did and what I needed. And she said, "Hey, you should give my neighbor a call. His name is Julius Shulman. Here's his number." And I had never heard of him. I gave him a call. He invited me over there. And on that day that I met him, my world changed. I was introduced to both his work as well as the man in one trip up to, like people say, we used to hold court up there on Woodrow Wilson Drive at his house. And right away, we had a connection. He reminded me of my maternal grandfather. And it was a combination of getting to seeing the photographs and then meeting this person. And we had there was just a real personal human connection. And I just thought to myself, hey, I'm going to become friends with this guy. And I spent a lot of time with him. As I said, that was spring of 99, and we became friends. And then I proposed the idea for a movie to him right around the end of 2001. It was my New Year's resolution for 2002 to do a movie on Julius Shulman and the photography and the architects and the architecture.
And thus began a multi-year journey through what, 2008, 2009?
Yeah, we finished the movie at the end of 2007, and then we premiered it in June of 2008 at the LA Film Festival, which was the perfect festival to premiere that movie. And then it was released theatrically. It opened in New York. It was October 9th, 2009. And we were doing that because, Julius is he's known for many things. And one of them is that his birthday, he was born on 10/10/10. And so we were using his birthday that was the date for the opening weekend. Sadly, he passed away in July of 2009. So he was unable to see the theatrical release.
I heard there was some killer birthday party for him at Kelly Lynch's house.
Yes. I'll let you disclose that information. I wasn't there, but yes, supposedly it was quite the event.
I guess that must have been a few years before, in 08 or 07.
Because he was there?
Yeah. I guess so. Yeah, she's been a guest on the show, and she's mentioned it before.
Yeah, there's something about a large cake and a woman, I think.
One of those.
Yes, I think so. I think you're right about that. We'll have to get her back on and talk about that special party. Eric, what were some of the major magazines at the time that photographers wanted to get their clients' houses and buildings into?
I don't consider myself an expert on the magazines. I just remember every time I would go up to Julius's studio, and this is every time, there would always be a fresh stack of magazines, and they came from all over the world. There were Japanese magazines and Italian magazines, and I would look at the stack and then look at Julius, and he would just always say, "It never ends." That was his line.
Yeah, he was published all over America, but really all over the world. I mean, to places like GA Houses, which is a very exclusive Japanese architecture magazine.
Yeah, and one of the things, besides being a brilliant photographer, and I also think he was a master photographer, and I like to say he was a master at living life. He was a really good businessman. And one of the brilliant things that he did was he retained the rights to the negatives. And those negatives, they traveled around the world multiple times over decades. And now, thankfully, they reside in the Getty Research Institute, and they're made available to the world. And you can access them online through their digital collection.
I know we have in our archives Architecture Record, Progressive Architecture, Architecture Forum, and the Ferrari of them all, which was a publication called Arts and Architecture that lasted about 20-some years and then came back briefly in the 80s. Keith, what are the publications that photographers are trying to get into now, both in print and online?
Sure. Well, the main one in the United States is often Architectural Record. That's sort of the big one you're always hoping for and shooting for. It's sort of the most prestigious, I would say, at the moment. There's, of course, Architect Magazine, and abroad there's publications like Divisair, which is Italian, and Wallpaper, with it being global and with the advent of online publications, things can really get around quickly. And online especially, say something gets picked up in something like Dwell or Dezeen online, and it can kind of steamroll, domino, go from one to the next. And so, yeah, I think that's often the hope, is a project will get picked up once and then it just kind of falls into place.
Which is better these days, to be published digitally or in a print format?
Oh, man, that's probably a point of contention for some. I think, it's lovely to see something in print, and that always lasts. I guess the internet will always last. That's a whole other conversation. But I would say the most advantageous, perhaps, is online. It's something that'll reach a lot more people. Not everybody's going to see the print publication, though chances are, more often than not, if you are in print, then you're going to be online. So I think print's still the goal, knowing that you also get online as well.
Eric, tell us about Julius's early career and his connections to some of the similar architects that we talk about all the time, like Neutra and Schindler.
Julius his career started by chance. I'll go back to high school. He was given a vest pocket camera by his sister, and I can't remember at what age, but floated around Los Angeles. At the time, this was the burgeoning city of Los Angeles, if you even want to call it a city. He moved to Los Angeles in 1920, so I think it was maybe around 1926 when he got that camera and would explore Los Angeles and take photos. And I believe it was his junior or senior year in high school. He only ever took one class, and he took a high school photo class. And there's an image called Track Meet, and it's a brilliant image. And you could definitely see, if you go and look at that early work, you can see that he had an eye. As the famous architectural critic Esther McCoy wrote, Julius has the rare eye that sees. So he floated around. He was quite proud of the fact that he went to 7 years of college and never ended up with a degree. And after attending classes at UCLA and UC Berkeley, made his way back to Los Angeles. And his sister was renting a room to a draftsman who worked for the architect Richard Neutra. And one thing led to another. Julius ended up photographing in March of 1936 Neutra's Kuhn house, which is actually very close to where Julius ended up living on Woodrow Wilson Drive. And those photographs were delivered to Richard Neutra, and the great Richard Neutra said, "Bring him to me. Bring me
the head of Julius Shulman."
Right. Or the eye.
Yes, all of the above. And his career was launched. And really what happened was Richard Neutra basically introduced Julius to major names, different levels, but Rudolf Schindler and Raphael Soriano, an already established architect as well as upstart architect. And Julius was instantly in business.
And from there, it just took off.
Did he only take one class in high school and it was photography? Did I hear that right?
He only took one photography class, and that was in high school.
Oh, okay.
You got that turned around.
Yeah, I just got the only in the wrong place. And then 7 years of college and no degree.
Right.
Oh, man.
But very proud of that.
Yeah. Well, he turned out fine.
Yeah, he did. He did okay.
We always say he was the pick of the litter. He had, I think it was 4 siblings. He was the youngest. And all of his siblings had to work at the family store and do chores. And Julius was out running around. He was a Boy Scout and out taking photos. And what I hear is that when the other siblings would complain, the mom would say, "Leave Julius alone. He knows what he's doing." And I honestly think he was like the golden child. His life just seemed to unfold for him.
And did he have kids?
He did. He had one child. Her name was Judy, and sadly, she passed away in September of 2020.
Oh, that's too bad. She was in the movie.
She was. Yeah, Judy and I were friends, and unfortunately, I hadn't spoken to her in a while, and I found the information out, and I was shocked, and been reconnecting with a lot of my friends from that world since I found that information out.
Now, Eric, I'm going to get this all wrong, but it seemed like there was some mathematics to Julius's genius, that he positioned the point of focus of the photo in this kind of 9-block grid, and he was pointing to one of the corners of this block. I'm not describing this well at all, but was there kind of a formula behind the way that he could position houses, particularly when he was shooting outdoors and trying to get them lined up with the site?
Well, I don't want to speak to the technical aspects, and maybe Keith might be better suited to do that. But I will say, in terms of kind of his overall philosophy and approach, because he didn't talk a lot about the technical aspects. He would, a lot of times when people would ask him about that, he would kind of wave his hand at them and like, "What are you talking about?" I think his biggest thing, and this is what I learned from him, is that when you create a photograph, You want to create something that when people look at, they stop and it grabs their attention. And from there, in terms of composition, you might have more dimension to it that pulls the viewer in, and then you're able to kind of capture their attention and communicate information. And the final thing I'll say in terms of the technical aspect, that the one key point that is used quite a bit in his photography is the use of single point perspective.
And what is that?
Keith, are you able to give a technical answer on? Great.
Sure. So, starting with single point perspective, I think it's one of the truer ways to represent modern architecture, because it kind of, with that, all of the planes sort of diverge or come at you and unfold in different ways. And I think it works really well for modern architecture. And at the same time, it's also one of the more complicated ones, because you really got to get everything right and get everything really lined up well. And it's not as forgiving, perhaps, as a more oblique angle. And speaking to the grid idea, I believe his viewfinder might have had that grid there in the camera and should have worked within that grid. I have noticed through reviewing his work that he was quite fond of sticking things in certain quadrants that I perhaps would avoid because I'd find them maybe distracting. But, he was really adamant about making things feel lived in and making you feel like you're there, and almost sort of easing up the formality of the architecture in a way that really makes it like he's known for, which is bringing in that more of that lifestyle look to everything. And I think it makes it more relatable for a lot of people.
Now, Keith, since most of us are not professional photographers, I would say 99.9% are not, and our preparation time for taking a photo is what, 10 seconds? Architectural photography is a lot more elaborate than that. I don't think people understand the time it takes to go to a building and start setting up shots. What's involved in that?
Oh, there's a lot of pre-production involved, sort of in the same way you produce a movie or documentary and you've got your storyboard. We sort of look for our storyboard too with this approach, and you get to know the project through the architects and hopefully try to understand their design intent and their story, because the story is really important for them as they present these projects for awards and accolades. And so hoping to capture and condense that story into a strong collection of images, be it 10 to 20 images, is often the goal. So, we try to discuss the project first, and then we'll go out and we'll scout it and go through it together and look at things together and get an idea of what the main views are that we want to make sure we capture in that one day, if we only have one day. From there, we can plan around our light, which is obviously the biggest and most important aspect is the light. And so you got to be in the right place for it. And so once we have those, say, 12 views that we want to make sure we get, we plan the day around those. And of course, we'll have extra time to do other things. And from there, some images, they can happen in 15, 20 seconds. You might spot something over off in the distance. You run over there and you get it, and all of a sudden it's gone. Poof. And other times you might have predicted that it would be there and you have planned for it, and you might wait for it for however long you need to wait for it. Hope that helps.
So do you usually show up like super early before the sun rises?
Oh, you know it. We're there far earlier than I ever wish we had to get up and be there. I'm not much of a morning person. Once you're up and you're watching the actual sunrise, it's always worth it, but nobody likes to get out of bed at 4 a.m.
Yeah. And you're there all day and you're trying to catch I always hear about the morning light and the afternoon light. Is there such a thing as noon light? Is that any good, or is that just,
Nah.
I would say so. Maybe in later fall and winter months, noon is forgiving. But gosh, in the middle of June or July, that noon light is brutal stuff. And that's usually when we say, we'll call it lunch for three hours, hopefully.
In the winter months, the noon light is still coming in at an angle, which is what makes things more interesting.
Precisely. You get those extra shadows, and that reveals extra texture and dimension in the project. And that's what's so nice about that morning light, that afternoon, evening light, is it's that angle. So you hit the proverbial nail on the head there.
Now, Eric, going back to, the 30s, when Julius started, he was obviously using film in the cameras. Did he ever become part of the digital revolution in photography?
He didn't. And I would say he marveled at it, and at the same time, he didn't want anything to do with it. So constantly people would, when they come up and visit him, or he had quite a full social calendar when he was out. People would always want to show their pictures of whatever on their digital cameras, and a smile would come on his face, and yet he didn't. Sometimes they would offer, like, hey, here, you hold it, and you can flip things. Like, no, like he wouldn't want to touch it. So yeah,
like it would shock him.
Witchcraft.
Exactly. Yeah. He would melt away. Yes.
Well, that was something I found interesting about the documentary, if I may, Eric. How I learned that he one day, late 60s, somewhere around 1970, said, "The heck with it. I don't like this architecture anymore. This postmodernism, and I quit." And that to me was, I know he continued to work afterwards and later on, but that seemed like a pretty rash decision. I guess he'd already had such a successful career, or how did that work?
Yeah, well, my take on it is that when you have been doing it since, this was, I think it was towards the late 70s, mid to late 70s.
Okay.
And so by that time, we're looking at a 40-year career. And, when you don't have to work, he wasn't wealthy, but he had a house that was paid for, and he had money in the bank. And I think he was quite a principled person. He wasn't short on opinions. I think that comes out in the movie. And I think, just kind of a number of things came together. It's like, you know what? Heck with it. I don't need it anymore. And he did hang it up.
I thought that'd be quite admirable. At that point, he would have such an extensive archive, which is obvious there. And I guess you can continue licensing. And it seemed like he was a really wise businessman as well. So I think he probably had that in mind as well.
Going back to being a master at life, or at the art of living, Julius was very, very well balanced in work-life balance. Well, I'm catching myself as I'm saying this because I know Judy would immediately offer a counterpoint. So he was a workaholic. He did the Getty, I believe, acquired, I think it was somewhere around 8,300 projects, I think, went to the Getty. And that's a lot of work. But he was never rushed. He was famous for going to architectural sites and, okay, we got our 2 exteriors, let's go have lunch. Just really taking his time. And he lived quite the balanced life. And I think that was part of it too, in terms of just like retiring and having that time to just enjoy life.
Eric, regarding the film, Dustin Hoffman was the narrator. Did he have any connection to architecture, or was he just a fan of Shulman in general?
So his connection was, he was involved at Santa Monica Community College. I think he did attend Santa Monica Community College, but I believe he was on the board for, there was a new performing arts center that he was involved in. And the story goes that as they were putting up the structural elements of the building, he said, hey, this looks like sculpture. We should get somebody to photograph it. And the name Julius Shulman came up. And Dustin Hoffman ended up calling Julius to have him and Jürgen, who is in the movie with Julius. It was Julius's photographic partner at the time. And they went and ended up photographing that structure for him. And then fast forward, I don't know how many years later, but they had started the Julius Shulman Institute at Woodbury University. And Dustin Hoffman was the recipient of the Julius Shulman Excellence in Communications Award. And I went to that event where he received the award. And when I listened to him speak, the way he talked about acting and his craft, I thought, wow, this guy, he is quite authentic. And the chemistry between Julius and Dustin on stage was just, it was there. And I thought he would be an appropriate voice to narrate this film. And I went up to him and I asked him right there and then, it just seemed like every time we would get a yes from somebody in terms of participation on the project, it just went very smoothly, from investors to interviewees to Dustin Hoffman. He said, yes, I would love to do it. Here's my number. Call my assistant and let's make it happen.
And how did the film get its name, Visual Acoustics?
That That was always a working title.
I think it's a great title myself as a sound guy.
Good. I'm glad you do. And it is related to sound. Julius had come up with that term. I think it's a reference to Goethe's quote about architecture as frozen music. That's not the exact quote, but that's the essence of it. And Julius, when he photographed the Bradbury building, which is in downtown Los Angeles, a lot of people know it from Blade Runner. It is in the first Blade Runner movie, Toymaker Lives. And
okay, sure.
When he's walking through and there's the elevator, I think it's an 1890s building, I think. But when Julius photographed it, which I think was in the 1980s, he said, this building has visual acoustics. Like I can hear what I see. And we had always used that as a working title. And at one point, we were having lunch. We were trying to come up with the name. And it kept going around. We had a bunch of different names. And he slammed his hand down on the table. I was like, call it Visual Acoustics, damn it. They'll love it. And so that was pretty much it. The king had ruled. And so we stuck with it.
It really is a great title because once you start understanding the breadth and depth of Shulman's career and working with all these incredible architects and the houses and the visuals in the film, I mean, what a great thing for a documentary filmmaker to have all these wonderful photos ready to go.
Oh, I mean, this was for me, this was a dream project. And it's every reason why I wanted to be a filmmaker. I knew at 10 years of age I wanted to make movies. I thought I wanted to make narrative films. But when I became friends with Julius, and then there were a couple movies that influenced me, there were a few things that fell into place and just light bulbs went off. Like, wow, this would be an incredible movie. It's got this incredible photograph, all these photographs to work with, photographs of architecture. Got an amazing person, in terms of a character. And he is more than willing to bring me into his world. And it was just, that was my first film. And it was a journey. And it still is to this day. I mean, the movie still plays. And, here I am talking to you about it, 10 years later, or more than 10 years, really, in terms of it premiering.
As they say in Hollywood, this project has legs, Eric. It has a long, long lifetime.
What's interesting about it, independent film, I see it as a stewardship. It's a labor of love, and it's, still, I put quite a bit of time into it, and I do it because, number one, I love the material, and number two, I feel like I'm a part of not only continuing Julius's story and the intent behind his work, but also helping to promote the ideals of modern architecture. And I believe in what these architects and designers, they were brilliant in what they were trying to do. And I think ultimately it makes the world a better place to live in. So I see it as it has legs too, and I'm happy to get to run with it.
Now, Keith, one technology that Julius did not use, in addition to digital cameras, is drones. You are a drone operator. When did you start using them?
Well, it's been about a year now since I got my license. And while you can be a hobbyist and unlicensed, and you can just wreak havoc on anything you want to and not get in trouble. If you're commercial, you get in trouble. So we are licensed as of last year.
And how do you use the drone in your work?
Well, most architecture is presented in a plan from overhead. So it's incredibly useful, first and foremost, to capture that overhead view. You understand the building and the site and any challenges that might have been presented by the site, which is something that's really through and through the work of Julius Shulman with out there in Palm Springs. That's a big challenge, was the site. And also just to have some context, whether it be the neighborhood or anything else around.
I'm always impressed when I see drone footage at the quality of the camera. The images are just so sharp from 200, 400 feet up in the air in these tiny little drones.
It is quite impressive. The drone that I use is a DJI Mavic 2 Pro, and this particular model, they collaborated with Hasselblad, which is a pretty well-known camera maker, and they really packed a punch in that little tiny lens and computer and camera in there. It is quite surprising.
Would you characterize yourself as a drone nerd?
Man, honestly, I was quite hesitant for a long time to get into drones. I had this thing against it. I don't know why. It was wrong. I don't know.
Maybe,
I think I was
maybe
always...
the military connotations don't
Yeah,
help.
the military, precisely. It's this invasion of your space and privacy. And eventually I broke, and I'm really happy that I did.
Now, Keith, for us mere mortals who are not professional photographers, and we want to go out and shoot a building, give us some tips. What are some rookie mistakes we can avoid or some helpful tips that we can do?
Don't go at lunchtime.
We've established the lunchtime. Yeah, I mean, unless it's the winter, as we said, you can get a lot done in the winter. First off, I always watch your lines. I mean, architecture needs to be represented the way that it was built, which is hopefully straight. Otherwise, a lot of problems happen. So if you can keep your lines straight, that's your first step to making a strong architectural image. And
so wait a second, because that sounds a little technical. What does keep your lines straight mean?
Right, the lines of the building itself. You don't want it to have two opposite sides of the building converging upwards or downwards, so it looks sort of distorted.
Okay.
Right, the effect that looks like it's leaning back, maybe.
Yeah, that's not a really good architect because you've got one that's kind of leaning back.
So how do you do that? Because I'm thinking if I'm taking my iPad out and I'm holding it up to a building, those edges of the walls are going to kind of go inward a little bit as I go further up.
This is true. And then that's the challenge if you're close to your subject, and your subject being the interior or the exterior of the building. If you're close, you will encounter that. And that's where you need to get maybe farther back. And if you're away from the project, you'll have a little more leeway where architectural photographers use tilt shift lenses, and that allows you to basically move up what you're looking at. So say you're looking at the building straight on, and at your perspective, you have a lot of ground in the foreground, and you want to get rid of that. So we're able to kind of shift up and get that out of the way and put the emphasis on the building itself. And so without those lenses, you got to step back away from the project or from the subject. And what most of us have now with these newer iPhones and I guess the Pixels, and I have an iPhone 11 Pro, which is last year's model, and you can now correct your perspective. So if you have that angled issue where everything's converging, you can correct that now, which is nice.
It's cheating.
Yeah, I think it's probably maybe what Shulman thought, about digital. It was cheating a little bit, but we're figuring out all these great ways to capture the images more successfully.
In the end, it's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Now, Keith, I guess for 15 years on architectural awards submissions, at least half of them I see have that rich royal blue light. It looks like it was captured 5 minutes before sundown. I've seen it as a technique. Does that have a name?
It's got a few. It's the blue hour. It's known as the blue hour or the twilight shot. And really the advantage of that is you're able to expose both the interior and the exterior. And for some, the advantage is also you're able to sort of conceal maybe defects or material issues or construction issues on the exterior.
Is there any kind of shot that's, as they say, trending now that's going to be some of the future of architectural photography?
Today, I'm seeing a lot more of emphasis on vignettes and sort of smaller moments versus that big open hero shot. And I think getting into some of the details and things like that.
Okay. Now, Eric, you're working on another architect we love, Long Beach architect Edwards Killingsworth, who was one of the famous case study architects. How's that going?
It's going really well. I've been working on it for quite a while. Last year was a lot of research. And this will be my first narrative film. So I'm writing a script. And I love it. I love the material. I love Killingsworth's work. And Killingsworth was one of Julius's favorite architects. For me, his work is, I would call it modern classic romanticism. I mean, it was really he was a master at proportion. He's working in the modern aesthetic. And there's a sense of romanticism to it in that one of his well-known lines is he was creating spaces where the spirit can soar. And there was no gimmickry whatsoever in his work. And I feel that the spaces that I have visited of his work, I do feel a sense of elevation, let's say. One of them is the Frank House, the case study house number 25, which is in Long Beach. It's right there in Naples, and I had the good fortune to visit that. And there's a very famous Shulman photograph where there's actually, I believe it was a salesperson from the famous Frank Brothers furniture store. He's standing outside of this 18-foot door, and he's entering the building. And Killingsworth was known for tall doors. We named the production company Tall Door Productions. But when I went into the case study house number 25, immediately you enter in the courtyard. And again, Shulman photographed all of this, and you can find it at the Getty Research Institute online. But instantly walking in, having that grand entrance of an 18-foot door and then stepping into this enclosed courtyard that lets all of the light in, it felt like I walked into some type of palace. And it's,
yeah, that's a big door.
Yeah. He's known for these big doors, and he creates these spaces. We're focusing on the Kahala Hilton, which Killingsworth, Brady, and Smith, that's the name of the architecture firm at the time, they designed that for Conrad Hilton. And it's not only a seminal hotel in the Hilton Hotels International empire, but it really changed the trajectory of Ed Killingsworth's career. And we're focusing on that hotel. I have not yet been out to Hawaii to visit it. I'm sure looking forward to doing that. But that truly is, I think it's a masterpiece. And there's a great photograph that Julius took of a woman in an evening gown standing underneath this incredible chandelier in the lobby of the Kahala Hilton.
Eric, where can people see Visual Acoustics now? Is it available in any of the streaming services yet?
It is. It's been available for many years. On the easiest way to get it, it's on iTunes and it's on Amazon.
Okay.
We have a website we have been working on with a UK distributor. They're called Network. And our co-producer of the film, Will Pace, wrote a book. They designed a beautiful book that just came out. You can actually get them on our website, which is juliusshulmanfilm.com. And so it's a book, and it also comes with a Blu-ray of the movie, and then a bunch of extra special features. One of them, which I had wanted for years, was a Shulman photo gallery that you can put up on your big screen TV and have a cocktail party while you have your virtual Shulman gallery running.
Oh, yeah. I love that. And Keith, how can people get in touch with you when they need their building shot?
Well, you can find me at isaacsphoto.com. It's ISAACSPHOTO.com, and also on Instagram at Keith Isaacs Photo. And I think those are the two most efficient ways.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here to talk about photography. It's always a pleasure.
It was my pleasure.
It's a pleasure participating.
Stacey Kent grew up just outside of New York City. She studied French, Italian, German, Portuguese, and we assume English, as well as comparative literature, because she'd want to compare all those languages, of course, at Sarah Lawrence College. She began her singing career by accident during a trip to Europe, and it's a good thing she made that trip, as she became one of the most popular jazz singers in the UK during the late 1990s with gold and platinum albums. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you very much.
You have an interesting connection to architecture through your family.
I do. I grew up in a house filled with architects or architect students. So my dad was an architect. My grandfather ran a lumber yard where my uncle worked, and my older siblings, my brother and sister, although they didn't go on to become architects, they studied architecture in college. So I was the black sheep, but
the singer.
You know, I went into the arts, and the rest of the family was not at all on that path. But I think that everything that they were studying and engaging in and talking about and working in had an effect on my life. You know, we're all fueled and fed on these diets of all the things we grow up on. And in my formative years, I think that architecture is part of the story.
What was your master's degree in that you were working on when you had a sudden change in life?
So after I finished, and you mentioned it, I graduated from Sarah Lawrence, and I had a degree in comp lit, and I went to Europe in order to further my degree. I had spent every one of my summers when I was at college at Middlebury College studying on their language program. So I was set up and ready to be on an academic path. And I went over to Germany because that was the least strong of my languages. And this was what I was pursuing. I thought I didn't quite know what my direction was going to be because, as many kids who finish college, you sometimes know and sometimes you don't know. So I went to work on my German and started some master's credits from Middlebury and was collecting this to go on to study language and literature. When I got to Europe, that is when everything changed. I was away from my parents and I was away from my comfort zone. And I feel like fate just kept pushing me onto this path because I kept running into musicians, which was weird because I was at college. And I started to sing, and I ended up going to England. And I was visiting some friends who were on a junior year abroad program at Sarah Lawrence. And there was this strange moment because there was this ad for a 1-year postgrad course in music. I'd grown up playing music, studying music, playing the piano, classical piano, that kind of thing. So impetuously, I decided to just put a halt on my studies because you can hold on to your master's credits for 10 years. And I wasn't really thinking thoroughly. I just thought, you know what? I love music. I want to go study some music. It was such a weird decision. I went and auditioned on this course. I didn't really think they would take me, to be honest, because everybody on the course had already studied undergrad music and I hadn't. I was just, kind of winging it. And they did take me. And so everything stopped and I left Germany and I went to England and I went on this postgrad course, not thinking that I would have a career in music at this point. I was still just playing around. I was a kid.
Now, did this postgrad course cover vocal music?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it was a small course. It's a 1-year postgrad with 25 students. And so you had 4 sax players and 4 pianists and 4 bass players. And, they basically tried to cover all of the instruments that would be in a musical setting, in this jazz setting, let's say. And they had 4 vocalists, and I was one of them. So I was studying things that I hadn't studied before, like harmony and aspects of the music this is what I mean, that I didn't think that they would take me because I wasn't really prepared for all of that. But they did, and I hung in there, and I loved it. But then what happens at school, this is the best part, and this is really the turning point part. When you're on a postgrad music course, lots and lots of people call the school looking for students to come and perform because we're cheap and we're available and we're keen. And so you get these calls to do parties, basically, at the Natural History Museum or the British Telecom Tower. And word got out about me. I started doing these gigs. I started getting asked, somebody would attend and say, hey, are you free on August 4th? Are you free on September 5th? And I was going and performing all the while, just learning, taking it all in, cutting my teeth, putting in the hours, and still not thinking that I would do this for a living. I still thought I would go home and continue my master's. But because word of mouth spread about me, and it kept spreading, somebody from Sweden came along and said, hey, do you want to come and do a tour in Sweden? And so suddenly, England turned into the rest of the continent, and one thing led to another. All the while, I have to quickly but very importantly say that my husband, Jim Tomlinson, who is now my saxophone player, my producer, my composer, et cetera, and I've been with him for 29 years, was also on that course. And so we were on this course together, falling in love and doing these gigs. And when the course came to an end, there was no way I was going anywhere.
And like you, he was not a trained musician, right? He was a philosophy major?
Oh, really?
Jim studied at Oxford. He was what they call a PPE student, which is philosophy, politics, and economics. And he was also on an academic path, but with this great passion for music, played at the Oxford College Big Band, and thought he would do, this is what's so uncanny, he would do this 1-year course impulsively and then go back to whatever he was doing. So the fact that we were we were two kids, the same age, but from very different cultures, very different backgrounds, but with this same strange drive towards this one-year course that kept pushing us together and allowed us, this is why I kind of believe in fate, allowed us to fall in love and spend this time together. And we went on our merry, merry way after that.
Well, it's a great story. And I think it's really fascinating about how you guys have been together so long and produced so many wonderful albums.
It's amazing. And I still, I'm not going to lie to you. I still look back and kind of pinch myself. Lots of people have these kind of stories that you just end up getting bumped on a path, especially if you're away from home, because you're kind of in free fall. You're away from your parents. You're away from that zone where you've been with your friends and the things that you know. And it allows your perspective to move just that much wider. And the possibilities are all just there. And I have over the years run into an awful lot of Americans abroad in Europe whose stories are similar because they got bumped onto this weird, strange path that allowed them to make different kinds of decisions. And that's what I love about my story. I think that it has allowed me to have a point of view. This isn't just about my music. This has allowed me to have a point of view about life, which is that you've no idea what's around the corner or who's around the corner that's really going to change your life. And I think that led to and fed a lot into my open-mindedness and open-eyedness and optimism.
Well, here's something, speaking of being away from home. Each year, between December and April, the Ice Hotel in the village of Jukkasjärvi, Sweden, is opened up. The world's very first ice hotel has 80 rooms and suites, an entrance hall, a chapel, and, of course, an absolute vodka ice bar. The entire hotel is made out of snow and ice blocks taken from the Torn River, and even the glasses in the bar are made of ice. Each year, the hotel accepts about 200 applications from artists to design the world-famous hotel's 15 art suites. Here's a song, Stacey Kent with Ice Hotel.
Let's you and me go away to the Ice Hotel. The Caribbean's all booked out, and it's just as well. Once I'd have been much keener on Barbados or Antigua, but just now I think the Arctic will suit us well. Let's you and me go away to the Ice Hotel. They've built it all with ice that's pure and clear. The sofas, the lobby, even the chandelier. A thermostat guarantees a steady -5 degrees. What other place could serve our needs so well? Let's you and me go away to the Ice Hotel. Romantic places like Verona or Paris, they'll always lead you astray. You'd have to be a novice to ever trust Venice and those dreamy waterways, and what the tropics can do, I know only too well. So let's you and me go away to the Ice Hotel. considered too dangerously warm. And when the time comes for us to sleep, we'll spread out our reindeer fleece and curl up together on an ice block carved for two. But then in the morning, provided we've made it through, we'll step out together to watch the sunrise over that vast expanse of cold. And who knows, if we're lucky, we may find ourselves talking of what our future may hold. This is no whim of the moment, I want you to realize. Let's go away to that palace made of ice. Let's you and me go away to the ice hotel. The Bahamas are all booked out, and that's just as well. I don't think we're quite ready for Hawaii or Tahiti, and when we will be, only time will tell. Let's you and me go away to the ice hotel.
Stacey, that song is so specific. I have to guess you've actually been there.
No, I haven't been there, actually. And the person who wrote the lyric, Jim wrote the music, and Kazuo Ishiguro, the great novelist, wrote the lyric. Oh. And when you have a lyricist like Nobel Prize winning Kazuo Ishiguro writing for you, he can transport you anywhere in the world and make it feel real. And yes, all those details are correct. It's funny because when fans come to the shows and they listen to the words, they say, oh, I've been there, and it's exactly like that. It is steady -5 degrees, and they describe the images. So he nailed it.
Yeah.
Well, I can't imagine there are that many songs about ice hotels. So, they would be stupid not to have this playing in their lobby in Sweden.
They do actually play it in the lobby.
Oh, well, good.
We've heard from the Ice Hotel. There's one in Canada now as well who has also gotten in touch. I think the thing is, when it comes to the emotional side of Ishiguro and what it is that he wants me to say, because he writes for me as his protagonist, it doesn't really matter where the song takes place. The essence can be anywhere in the world. And I think that's what makes these stories so universal. So it's specific, and yet it's this push-pull love story between these two. Anyway, it exhilarates me every time. I love working with Ishiguro.
I'm ready to book.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go.
And those are great lyrics. I mean, I did feel as if you'd been there.
Yeah.
You faked it well.
Because he transports me exactly that.
Let me ask you this, Stacey. You were in Great Britain for a long time. How is the jazz scene over there different than America?
In a sense, it's hard for me to answer this because although I was based in the UK, I didn't really work in the UK more than anywhere else that I was touring to. Once the touring started, I was there as much as I was anywhere else. If I'm perfectly honest with you, I ended up in England kind of by accident, as you know, and stayed there. I really like England as a country, but I was hardly there because I was always on tour. But they had a great airport for me because, as touring started to get going, and it really got going kind of early in my career, we moved around so much. So we were on the continent, and we were in Asia, and we were down in South America, and we were here. And I will say this in answer to your question. It's hard for me to pinpoint what the differences are because I think the kind of people who come to see my shows, who respond to the music, have a real shared sensibility. And so I was meeting people from all over the world. And I think this is such a privileged position to be in and such a beautiful part of the work that I do, is that I was meeting people whose daily lives were so different from one another. And yet they responded to music in such a similar way. And they were all sharing such same shared emotions, the same worries, the same thrills, the same concerns. And it really taught me very early on how people are just people wherever you go. So yes, you're right that people might react differently to music down in Brazil or anywhere in the world differently because of their personalities. But I didn't get to see that much of it.
Well, your voice is just arresting. When I first heard this next song, I was going, wow, who is that? This next song was first recorded and published in 1934 with music and lyrics by Ray Noble, and it hit #1. Teen star Ricky Nelson of Ozzie and Harriet fame, his version got on the Billboard chart, and Natalie Cole released her own version in 1992. There are so many approaches to this song, but Stacey chose to be the one that got away, that you've always wanted to hear back from. Here's Stacey Kent with The Very Thought of You.
The very thought of you, and I forget to do the little ordinary things that everyone ought to do. Kind of daydream. I'm happy as a king, and foolish though it may seem to me, that's everything. The mere idea of you, the longing here for you. You'll never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you. I see your face in every flower, your eyes in stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my love. The very thought of you, and I forget to do never know how slow the moments go till I'm near to you. I see your face in every flower, your eyes and stars above. It's just the thought of you, the very thought of you, my
Now, Stacey, I have to assume that's your husband Jim on sax?
That is my husband Jim on sax, yes. And on guitar is one of the fathers of bossa nova, the great guitarist from Brazil, Roberto Menescal.
Wow.
Roberto is the one who asked if we could record that. He grew up on a diet of jazz music, jazz guitar, as well as the French musicians like Henri Salvador. Barney Kessel was a big hero. And he wanted to make a record of standards with me. And so we did, and I let him pick all the repertoire because he hadn't recorded any of it yet. He's such a romantic, and he came up with these great songs on this album that we made called Tenderly. He made that arrangement. He wrote that. Even though Jim normally makes the arrangements, Roberto did that one, and it's just, I love how he plays it. I love how they both play that, yeah.
I know people want to know, where are you going to be playing in later 2021? Have you got some bookings lined up?
Well, yeah, everything is very strange and up in the air. All the dates that we had in 2020 were pushed to 2021. And technically, we're supposed to be out again on the road in April. I'm pretty skeptical that that's not going to happen. But we do have a tour because we have a new album coming out that we were going to put out in 2020, and we've deferred to 2021. So we should be out starting this tour. It's so hard to say. We've got Brazil in September. We've got Europe and Asia in October. People can go and see my site, which is staceykent.com, and they'll see the dates, a link there to see when it starts up again. I know that we're all just waiting to be vaccinated and for everybody to be safe, and we'll get out there.
I think you should be an essential worker. I vote for you to get bumped up.
That is so lovely. I think that's so sweet of you to say. I mean, we are kind of essential workers from home, and thank goodness for the internet, because instead of touring right now and putting out records, we're doing a lot of homework. We're releasing digital singles every 3 weeks so that we can keep engaged, and people are coming to us and saying, you're like Ishiguro transports me. I'm helping transport these people. Everybody's just closing their eyes and listening to these songs as they come out and engaging. There's community on the internet. And so that's been a real good stopgap until we meet face to face again.
Stacey, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be with you all.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Wendy Robineau and Don Beskind, and by Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for Modernist houses. Okay, Tom, take us out.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 8,000 significant modernist houses, and access 3 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Rogue archivist Carrie Cesarino researches guests while juggling 2 above-average children, 12 domestic animals, tiramisu, and her shockingly handsome husband, Adam, who knows just what to do to amp up her ohms.
Yes.
U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another visually acoustic, always photogenic edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.